Hello friends, my name is Volantis, and I'm jumping forward in time for today's challenge, specifically to the year 2511, where the events of Dead Space 2 take place. I had so much fun murdering an onslaught of necromorphs with only a gun that literally breathes fire that I wanted to do it again. I want to see if I can go another round with several hundred crunchy reanimated corpses and a set of arbitrarily restrictive rules. I went to Reddit once again to get the Dead Space community's opinion on which gun would be the hardest to beat the game with. I did a series of polls to see which is the worst, and of the 10 base game guns, you all voted for the flamethrower again. But because I already did that in the first game, I went with the runner-up, the Detonator. So today's challenge is to see if I can beat Dead Space 2 using only the Detonator. There's a lot to clarify for this challenge, so listen up. Number 1, weapons and suits. Obviously the Detonator is the only gun I'll be using, but there's a catch to that. Since the Detonator isn't available from the start, I'll have to complete the game once to unlock it, then have it ready to go on a new file. On that initial playthrough, I'll use and upgrade only the plasma cutter. That way when I reach the first store again, my suit and Detonator will be at base level. I will however need to use the plasma cutter up until I get to the store again, as there is literally no way to get another gun before then. The game holds all of your New Game Plus stuff until you reach the store. Let's be real though, if I can manage to do the rest of the game Detonator only, then Chapter 1 would be a breeze anyway. As for the suits, anytime you purchase one, you keep its upgrades when changing to another suit, even if you change back to an older one. So for this initial plasma cutter run, I can't use anything but the engineering suit you get in Chapter 1. I won't be allowed to use any suit schematics I grabbed in Run 1 until I reach their respective points in the game on Run 2, but I'll be sure to let you know when I do. Number 2, power nodes and credits. Obviously I will end up with extra nodes by the end of the first run, so I will restrict my supply of power nodes on the new game to be no less than what I finished Run 1 with, which was 23. The same goes for my credits, but I can throw away my leftover supply from the first run to end up with only what I acquired in the first chapter. Number 3, stasis, kinesis, and melee, also referred to by me as scam. Stasis and kinesis will only be allowed in areas where it's necessary to use them with the environment to progress. So things like power cells, panels, large machinery, etc. is totally fine. I'm going to allow melee for fuse boxes as well, as it's basically the only time I can use it on the environment to progress. But I can't use any of these methods against enemies or to collect items, even if they're out of reach. That's going to be tough though, since a lot of enemies don't drop resources until they've been double tapped. Number 4, no glitches or cheats unless they are necessary to avoid failing the challenge. I don't know how to intentionally perform any glitches for this game anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. Number 5, because I'm sure someone will ask if I don't say it, I'm playing on Survivalist, which is equivalent to hard mode. And I don't want to hear, But Volantis, why not Zealot mode? Why don't you want to make the game unnecessarily difficult so your challenge is pointless? Well, there's your answer, huh? My challenge, my rules. Suck it. 6th and finally, conduit rooms. These are available to me and they provide extra resources, but I will not be using them as they aren't available without having Dead Space Ignition save data, so they are off limits. So right off the bat, beating the game plasma cutter only made me want to commit toaster bath. The final chapter is literally just dickhead after dickhead, and they are not forgiving when you have the cheapest piece of crap equipment. I have no idea how people beat hardcore mode on this game without blowing their brains out. It wasn't until much later that I realized that beating any difficulty unlocks New Game Plus for every other difficulty, so I could have just played on easy to set this up. Basically, I went through hell for nothing. I guess I'm just a masochist. But nevertheless, I finish up all that and we can begin with the Detonator run. Chapter 1 is standard once I get the plasma cutter, but up until that point I had to avoid every slashy boy. Just because I have a cop-out to use the plasma cutter doesn't mean I get a free ride with kinesis after all. I also tried killing the slasher and triage when you get your stasis unit without using stasis, but it's literally impossible. It doesn't take damage until you fire a stasis shot at it, and it kills you in one hit regardless of the difficulty, so I'm not counting that against me. But anyway, soon after that I reach the store, and I can stop to take a breather and actually prepare for the challenge. I've got 330,360 credits and 27 power nodes, and you can tell by my inventory screen that I only have the base number of slots the starting suit comes with. Subtract the 322,260 credits I started the game with, and that leaves me with 8,100. I also started with 23 nodes, as you might recall, so I have 4 new ones to use. So now begins the tedious process of buying and throwing away expensive resources to get my credits down to the 8,100 I'm supposed to have. It hurt my soul to throw away an entire game's worth of med packs, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I also throw away the remaining items in my safe, leaving only the plasma cutter and one stack of ammo. And here I'm just showing you I got my credits down below 8100 before buying anything for me to use. I get my free suit, regretfully pass up a power node slightly out of reach, and now it's time to tackle the terrifying task of beating the first boss with a less than ideal gun I have yet to even practice using. I basically ran around the room like a little bitch trying to figure out how accurate I needed to be with this thing. Call me a quick learner, cause I had that thing dead in under 3 minutes. Before continuing to the next chapter, I wanted to practice my idea of breaking open item boxes. Kinesis is clearly not allowed, so I figured anytime I wanted the candy inside those piñatas, I would have to manually kick them into a cluster, then use a mine to blow them all up. Kinda like how you should blow up that like button if you're enjoying this video. But anyway, it worked as expected. This technique would also prove useful later on to pile up corpses and double tap them for resources. Now I get to practice using the detonator the way I expected would be most common, in a small, dark, crowded room, just like the gaming dungeon I spend 24 hours a day in. The first attempt in the laundry room went abysmally, but hey, trial and error. I will say, as annoying as it is to get backed into a corner and have to take splash damage sometimes, it's absolutely worth it for every time I see a stupid-ass necromorph run straight into a mine trap and completely destroy itself. The train section at the end was a lot more of that trial and error stuff I just mentioned. I had to keep retrying until I could memorize where each Scyther and Geodude spawned from, while also being accurate enough to kill them all. And yes, they are Scyther and Geodude, not Slasher and Exploder. I like Pokemon. Anyway, when Isaac hangs upside down, it does this little sway thing that throws off your aiming. I took quite a few close range shots and also messed up the brute part at the end, but I eventually managed to do well enough to survive the whole ordeal. Here we come to our first encounter with the pack. Screechy little crotch goblins like to bitch slap you around. These things are actually insanely weak. You can kinesis fire a dead one at an alive one, and it'll kill it. But unfortunately, that technique is off limits, which makes these little bastards tedious as all hell. But as we all know, I'm a member of the Supreme Gamer Elite and killed them all in one try. These mine traps are so fun. I traverse the room of Twitter opinions, and we finish up this chapter with the first of 2 plaza room ambushes. I ran low on ammo, but with some strategic mine placement, I got through it in one try. We finally reached the church. Praise Altman! It took a few tries to take out the infectors because they do not like to take damage from the detonator. Little bitches. But once that's dealt with, I reward myself with an upgrade to the security suit. Now this is where the detonator is at its best. Stalkers, or Greninjas, are usually one of the more terrifying enemies in my opinion, but they will just blindly run into my mine traps and obliterate themselves. Dumbass! Chapter 5 is a bit difficult, to say the least. So much so that I legitimately almost quit the challenge. The cryogenic section isn't anything to worry about, but everything after the coffin puzzle is a massive pain in my ass. Another tripod attacks, and this is where I started realizing how inconsistent the detonator is. You can fire dead center at its weak point, but don't expect it to work every time. I don't really know how to tell if I'm damaging its weak spot or not, but with some patience and a handful of restarts, you can get past it. Immediately after that is an ambush from the pack, which is annoying if you are low on ammo, as I was. More tedious than harmful, but immediately after that are a bunch more necromorphs that can really make your life hell until you learn when and where they spawn. With some more patience, I got fairly good at only killing what was necessary to get past this room and avoid getting my cheeks clapped. We reached the top of the church, and after watching Dana hilariously get shredded to bits, we hit a brick wall. The following sequence with the Tormentor is a dead end for the challenge, I'm afraid. When I say this part frustrated me more than any challenge prior, I'm not joking. When I played God of War on the hardest difficulty, I died just over 300 times across the entire 30-hour game. In this one little section alone, I died 122 times. 122! In all of my misery, I have concluded that the detonator is not able to get you past the Tormentor. At some point during the sequence, Isaac's body will explode from splash damage. The game won't recognize the death, however, until you fail to damage the Tormentor and it eats you, or you finish the sequence, after which you immediately die without getting the next checkpoint. I tried every possible option. I made sure I got there with full health and had my rig health and detonator damage upgraded as far as financially possible, but it made little difference. By the time the Tormentor picks Isaac up to hang upside down, he doesn't have enough health to survive another shot from the detonator. The game does not let you heal yourself during the encounter either. Trust me, I spammed that goddamn B button the whole time, and it did nothing. This is what I meant when I said the detonator was inconsistent. Sometimes I could one-shot the Tormentor's weak spot, and other times I could shoot it twice with no effect. Sometimes Isaac would take damage from the first shot, and sometimes he wouldn't. I have no idea how any of this works, and after 122 failed attempts, I gave up. Heed my warning. Do not leave yourself at the last save station before this fight with only the detonator. You will die every time, and there's no store available at this point for you to grab a different gun. But let's be real, few people are insane enough to try this, especially after I just described what fresh hell it is. I reluctantly looked up a couple other detonator-only runs on YouTube, and both of them used the plasma cutter for the Tormentor. One of them even agreed with me that using the detonator is impossible. So, I concede that I need to use the plasma cutter, but there is one last thing I'd like to try. Maybe the issue is the difficulty, and perhaps I just take too much splash damage on hard mode. So here's the plan. I'm going to reload the save file furthest back, kick the difficulty down to easy, upgrade to the best suit I have, take away the scam restrictions, and try again. And on literally the first try on casual, I got past the Tormentor without even going into red health. So it is possible, but I will admit I used the New Game Plus suit. However, you earn a shit ton more resources on easy than you do on hard. If I had done the entire run on easy, it's entirely likely that by this point in the game, I could have earned enough credits and sold enough crap to be able to buy the necessary number of power nodes to fully upgrade my health, which would have probably counteracted the armor buff I got from the Elite Engineering suit. But in conclusion, it is possible to get past the Tormentor with the detonator, just not on hard mode. But with enough health and armor, you can get by the Tormentor on a lower difficulty. On a technicality, the challenge continues. But within the rules of my challenge being on hard mode, this is unfortunately a failure. But don't worry, we're only 5 chapters down. I'm sure something will come along that stops me dead in my tracks anyway. It's time for the second Marker Plaza ambush, and this one was much less forgiving than the first. Pregnants are difficult to kill with the detonator without them spawning swarmers, and leapers are almost always too close to avoid splash damage, and this fight has both those bitches. And on top of that, I was low on mines. Needless to say, this fight didn't go so well at first. What I soon found I needed to do was quickly kill the first moo cow, then rush to the nearby store so I could buy ammo before more necros spawned. This little hallway over here also made for a decent funnel to not get swarmed by enemies, but once I figured that strategy out, it went a lot more smoothly. Next is the cyst hallway, and I found them to be much easier to deal with than I expected. At least the ones that can kill themselves were. I just run up on them real quick like, and then they pop out a necro turd that blows up everything in a 5-foot radius. Easy peasy. After another fun playdate with some stalkers, I meet some woman named Ellie. You know what, guys? I think I'm gonna make Ellie my girlfriend. I can see it now. The two of us in some rundown apartment on the moon we call home. I just hope she doesn't leave me for some douchebag. The concourse before the school was another pain in my tits. The cysts are easy, but it's having to kill the scythers and the puku-mukus while avoiding the cysts' line of fire that's the problem. Pukers are bitches. The only noteworthy part in the school is the gymnasium ambush. At least it would be noteworthy, if I wasn't such a fucking beast. Fake Nicole does some more spooky nonsense before I meet up with Ellie and Strauss and am forced to fight a Metagross. Sorry buddy, you'll have to find someone else's cheeks to clap. Get wrecked. Up next is another of my less favorable parts of the game, the tripod elevator. But lucky for me, a single detonator mine is enough to knock each of those big bitches out of the windows. Now I get to spend the next half hour with the most annoying female-voiced AI in existence. And no, it's not Siri. Auntie is a bitch. A mega bitch.
You a bitch. You know why you a bitch? Cause I said so. You just a bitchy bitch. You a bitch McBitcherson. You a bitch McBitch. I go to McDonald's and get a McBitch because you a bitch. Bitch.
This entire section isn't too hard to deal with one exception. The decompression window. If you are fortunate enough to have never made yourself try this, let me spare you the trouble. You cannot deactivate decompression windows with the detonator. It does nothing. So, how many times did I try this part before accepting the failure? Trick question, bitches! I never give up.
And after 122 failed attempts, I gave up.
I did try a few different tricks, but nothing was working at first. I even managed to stick a mine to the deactivation panel and fire a second mine to blow it up, but it did nothing. So, I'm sure you're wondering how I figured this part out then, eh? Well, there's no use in keeping it a secret. While dicking around trying to think of literally anything to try, this happened. I have no idea if this is intentional and I've never noticed, or if it's a bug and I got super lucky, but yay physics!
Yes, science!
I come to the mainframe room, and I sure hope my visitation is authorized.
Unauthorized visitor. Mainframe.
Damn it. Well, if I'm already a criminal, I might as well steal some treasure while I'm here. I grab the goodies hidden within the mainframe, shut down the mainframe itself, big boom some crusty bitches, and it's onto the solar array. What we have here, fellas, is our first encounter with a nest. I was anticipating it being troublesome, but as it often seems to be, it was surprisingly easy to kill. I tried my group boxes together and blow them up to save ammo trick, but I quickly realized what a pain in the ass that is to do in zero gravity. A lot of things just blasted out into the void of space faster than I could chase them, so I passed up a lot of potentially helpful resources for the sake of getting through this chapter quicker. Priorities. I fixed the solar array, yeet myself into a building at Mach 5, and it's time to do a little dance with some decomposing children. I don't like that I just said that sentence out loud. I have devised a strategy to survive the onslaught of all these punk-ass kids. It's called Run Like a Bitch. Chapter 8 is a lot of the same so far, being ass at aiming the detonator in tight spots. But a couple things worth noting. First, I found and upgraded to the vintage suit. Everyone loves a good discount, am I right? And second, I discovered an exploit with the detonator. You can unload the clip, then deactivate the mines and put them back in your inventory. This normally isn't very useful, except I can empty the detonator, then upgrade its capacity to get a free full clip. I did this twice to get the last 2 upgrades. Woohoo! The first big chunk of Chapter 9 is navigating the catwalks to get up to the tram. Straightforward under normal circumstances. But with the detonator, well, it's just not fucking fun. I mean, maybe it is for you, but not for me, man. I restarted checkpoints a lot because of the assiness of the detonator's accuracy. But regardless, I made my way to the tram before yet another thing diverted me from the main path. The stalker room was a bit tense this time, but I did still have fun making them run into traps and explode like the goddamn idiots they are. I obliterate another guardian, and I have to very carefully make my way through another cyst hallway. This was challenging to figure out. I knew that a scyther spawns at the far end when you walk by, and not all of the cysts will kill themselves, and I didn't want to use mines to deal with them all. So I planted one mine for the slasher, then carefully and quickly baited each of the cysts so that I could run by everything. I'm like Usain Bolt up in this bitch.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
Now I've come to the part with the big ass tanks you gotta blow up. My first thought, as I'm sure yours was as well, was to try the detonator on them. But as usual, nothing works like I hoped it would. I still have to kinesis shoot the canisters into the tanks. So I big oof the tripods, big boom the tanks, then big hoof myself back to the tram. Memories of a traumatic past are here to make my life hell once more. It's actually my favorite part of the game, the return to the Ishimura. But when I say this made my life hell, I mean it. This chapter can be broken down into 4 main parts: the tram tunnel, engineering, the medical deck, and the bridge. Each section has its own set of troubles, but the medical deck, or more specifically diagnostics, was the biggest piece of shit of this whole chapter. But we'll get there in a second. The tram tunnel isn't too bad. The fat boys go down quick if the detonator does its job and doesn't just bounce off of enemies like it tends to do. Once those are dealt with, you can run to the far end of the tunnel and place trap mines that will deal with most of the other necros that want to take a fat bite out of your sweetmeats. The hall before the centrifuge is a bit tricky though. There are a shit ton of enemies crammed in here, and without a quick trigger finger, they'll fuck you up, if you don't accidentally do it to yourself. Now for the medical deck. Fuck this part. Right in the cornhole. For starters, getting the mines to consistently damage enemies in the cryogenics lab was a pain in my ass. I was cursed with either an unnecessary amount of mines just bouncing off of slashers, or I wasn't correctly predicting their running patterns with my traps. Lots and lots of trial and error, for sure. But the real nightmare was in diagnostics. I didn't have a surplus of mines to blow through here, so I had to be meticulous. There are an obnoxious amount of leapers in this room. They're fast and they jump around, which makes them hard to hit and impossible to run from. There was no magic solution to this room, no strategy to discover. I literally had to just get good. That meant killing every leaper that attacks quicker than it can pounce on my sweetmeat, then do the same with the slashers that gang up on me at the end. But after 40 minutes of trying, I survived. Remember when I said this was my favorite part of the game? I'm not so sure now. The rest of the Ishimura is easy by comparison. The end is another game of kill the stalkers, and I always have fun doing that. More stalkers. Moving on. The biggest chunk of this chapter is in this large 2-level mining room. Ironically though, it isn't the hard part. There are lots of enemies, but there's also a lot of paths to help you dodge everything. I stumble upon Ellie and Strauss recreating their own ECW wrestling match, and she's upset for some reason, not being able to see or something.
You owe me an eye, you bastard!
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Anyway, the hard part is in this room here. In here, you get one narrow path to deal with everything. A couple Puku-Mukyus and Bulbasaurs, and a handful of enhanced Scythers. Trust me, it's annoying. Taking damage in this room is very easy if you don't place your mine strategically, which I had to try a bunch of times to get right.
What?
I kept screwing up trying to avoid getting hit by the last couple of enemies, and just got tired of trying, so I booked it for the door and accepted half of my health being gone.
There you are!
Oh, Strauss, what are you doing?
You have to face her for me!
Tell her I didn't mean to do it! Strauss, it's me!
See her!
It's Isaac!
Tell her!
Strauss!
Step 3! Step 3!
Strauss is dead, Ellie. Okay.
The elevator had me stressed, but honestly went smoother than expected. The strategy I tried was to place a mine to catch one of the slashers that drops each time, and then after it's dead, run to the other side of the elevator and shoot the second slasher directly. And this worked pretty well. Fake Nicole chokes me into submission,
Giggity.
and I arrive at the big drill. The Mega Ultra Deluxe Necro Anus Buster 9000, or Mudnab for short. The drill is literally the only part of the chapter, but I know it's a fairly long section, and I don't want to get stuck on it without ammo. So I stocked up on a small army's worth of mines and set out for the government sector. Planting mines on the drill is a no-go. The vibration from the Mudnab just sets them off immediately. So I've got to hit everything directly, while also killing the Bulbasaurs on the sides or avoiding their projectiles. Aside from a few cheap tricks, like the game having a puker right next to me upon reloading the checkpoint, or having the death trap of the drill ready for me to walk into accidentally, this part wasn't actually that bad. There are a handful of checkpoints throughout this entire section, so I didn't have to worry about doing the entire thing in one flawless run. It also helps that Bulbasaur's projectiles don't do much damage. Ellie nearly kills me by crashing through the wall of the government sector. Thanks, babe. But regardless, we're nearing our goal of finding the marker. I steal some beer money from the ATM, send Ellie away for nearly killing me, and have a heart-to-heart with the ghost before coming to the processing room for a fight. A lot of the same old with this one. Enemies are easy, as long as I can get a shot off before they run at me. A few resets, but nothing to complain about. I enlist the help of the zombies that just tried killing me to instead kill other humans. Then they decided they still didn't like me and tried to kill me too. In the process of fighting these butt nuggets, I learned the Puker's projectile can kill other necromorphs. Hell yeah. I dealt with the Greninjas as per usual, navigated the laser dodge room, and now it's time for the hardest part of the chapter. Apparently this little section is called Thermal Conduit Access? Okay, sure. It's this part with the red lighting and the 3 levels that ends with fighting a Metagross. It's a fucking bitch. Well, to be fair, it would have been easier if I had some health packs and more ammo. I had to go through this entire chunk on half health and nowhere near enough ammo to kill everything. And no, I did not have access to a store without reloading a save file much further back. Basically, I had to get lucky by baiting enemies far enough away from the doors to be able to run to them and not get hit. I got to the Metagross room with just a shred of health left, but because it only knows tackle and I can sidestep that in my sleep, I killed it very easily. I know what the next section entails, so I had to make some preparations. I may or may not have exploited the bench's respec function to get a half-priced full heal. I also purchased the advanced suit and stocked up for the next part. Chapter 14 is really short and can be summed up in one word: Ubermorph. Is Ubermorph technically a word? I don't know, but let's call him Staryu, because he can regrow his limbs and shit. I climb into a giant metal butthole, drill some raspberry jam out of my brain, and now I've got to endure an immortal zombie without using my depth perception. Theme of my next challenge, perhaps? Stasis is very useful when dealing with this big bitch, but as we all know by now, that's not allowed. So I'll have to make do with just mines. I planted a couple between the hacking panel and the vent it appears from, and that was enough to slow it down so I could unlock the door. The rest of the path to the safe room is just slowing down Staryu while I take out some other enemies. Stressful for sure, but I had little trouble. The final chapter is a long gauntlet of necromorphs, and of course, the final boss. But there are no stores after this last safe room, so I've got to stock up now. I filled my inventory with 4 large and 4 medium med packs, and 120 detonator mines. The final stretch, boys and girls. Let's go. On the way to the marker platform, we've got to navigate a handful of rooms with a variety of enemies. Scythers, Puku-Mukus, Bulbasaurs, Rayquazas, and of course, Staryu. Luckily for me, I had to do this part 6 million times during my Plasma Cutter prep run, so I've pretty much memorized what enemies spawn where. I did take a fair bit of damage here and there and died a couple of times though. I could see this part being very difficult if you haven't prepped for it like I had to, but with some of that trial and error I keep mentioning, this whole section is tolerable. Fake Nicole reveals herself as the main antagonist, spoiler, and it's my job to put her down. If for some reason you didn't already know, the fight works like this. Shoot Nicole to reveal the marker's ball bag, then shoot the ball bag. Do this enough times and Nicole goes away for good. But there's one problem. The detonator doesn't hurt the marker. Like, at all. I went at this a few times and even ran through every single mine that I had. Remember, I went into this with over 100 detonator mines, so that should be enough to kill literally anything. But sadly, no. I put explosive after explosive into that big pointy rock's meat bag, but it did nary a bit of damage. Something odd happens with the mines, because I would shoot the weak spot directly, but the mine will animate exploding way above it. Strange. So, I have reached an impasse. Is there something I'm just not doing right? Have I missed some key strategy? No, actually. No, the detonator just doesn't work here. It hurts Nicole, but not the marker. I even scaled back the difficulty to easy, and still nothing. I once again had to refer to the detonator only runs that I found on YouTube. Shout out to Vandal117, whose run I studied while attempting my own. I'll link his video in the description below. He went at this fight with only the detonator and had the exact same experience I did. Vandal even agreed with me that it does no damage. And he claimed even surviving for about 40 minutes without the boss dying. So I'm fully convinced the detonator is not usable, and unfortunately this challenge comes to a screeching halt right before the finish. But I have a backup plan to get as close to beating the challenge as I can. I regretfully had to reload my save at the start of the chapter for this, but this time I put an unupgraded plasma cutter in my inventory and stocked up on both mines and plasma energy. Using a base level plasma cutter doesn't qualify me to beat the challenge, but it's as close as I can get. It'll still be hard to beat. I repeated the chapter, blasting through everything with my detonator and got to the boss again. The plan was to use the detonator on Nicole in the pack and use the plasma cutter on the marker's weak spot. Each time I hurt Nicole enough to expose the marker, I only had enough time to empty one clip into it. And with how weak this gun is, I might as well be blowing spit wads at it. But nevertheless, after 7 waves of attacks and 64 plasma shots, I put an end to these horrific hallucinations, and Nicole is now dead for good. Ellie makes her dramatic entrance to rescue me in repentance for nearly killing me earlier, and we make like Team Rocket and blast off out of here. So in the end, the challenge ended up being a failure. A marathon sprint, only to have my legs give out right at the finish line. Technically speaking, the final boss is the only guaranteed failure of the challenge. As I just stated multiple times, the detonator mines do not damage the marker, so another gun is needed. The Tormentor at the end of Chapter 5 is beatable, but not on a new game on hard mode from what I could tell. You'll just take too much splash damage too quickly, even at full health. No, the only way around that is to lower the difficulty, but easy mode was not allowed in this particular run. So ultimately, can you beat Dead Space 2 without stasis, kinesis, or melee with only the detonator? Nope. But you can get pretty damn close. But anyway, that wraps up this video. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more gaming challenges in the future. It's completely free. Oh, and one last thing. I plan to do a full Let's Play series on God of War Ragnarok when it releases. I also plan on doing the Callisto Protocol, Dead Space Remake, and Resident Evil 4 Remake. So if you're interested in those, all the more reason to subscribe. But that's it for now. See you all in the next episode.